Hi, I'm Erin Miller with the Motley Fool. While the year is still new, it's safe to say that 2014 will go down in the history books for at least one reason. On January 1st, the states of Colorado and Washington legalized the sale of marijuana for recreational use, the first time that any state had ever done so. But even though this has fueled growing cannabis industries in both states, there is one major complication that could spell trouble for anyone involved in the business. Joining me now to discuss the potential problems is Motley Fool contributor John Maxfield. Hi, John. So you recently wrote a three-part series that examined the industry from the inside out. One of the biggest challenges that you identified in the series concerned taxes. What specifically is the issue here?
So the issue here, Aaron, is that under the tax code, it's kind of an interesting situation, because under the tax code, any revenue that any business earns, or rather any income that any business earns, is taxable under the tax code. They define it as tax or income from any source derived. However, to deduct expenses can only be deducted from legal activity under Section 280E of the tax code. So because marijuana, while legal on the state level, remains illegal on the federal level, that's an illegal activity in terms of, as far as the tax code is concerned. And as a result, any expenses that any of these businesses incur are officially non-deductible expenses in terms of federal income taxes.
Okay, so to anyone watching this interview that's thinking about getting into the industry, given your research into it, what would be your recommendations both with regard to taxes and the business more generally?
Well, with respect to taxes, I would just say that you'd probably be prudent to pay all of your taxes and not play in the gray area, because this is something that the IRS is probably watching relatively closely. And for people who are interested in getting into this industry, I mean, in the first case, there's obviously the stigma associated with dealing with what was, until recently, and at least on the state level, an illegal drug. But even beyond that, you're fighting against a huge first mover advantage. There have been a lot of people and a lot of capital flow into the sector over the past few years as medicinal marijuana came online, and now it's switching over to recreational in states. And those guys have got a huge advantage in both in terms of capital and in terms of cash flow. So it'll make competition very, very difficult for anybody new to the industry. And it's for that reason that I would strongly recommend that, if it is something you're interested in getting into potentially, that maybe you should be looking at the ancillary services as opposed to the actual growing or selling itself.
All right. Thank you, John. For a special free report on the Motley Fool's top stocks, just send us an email to topstocks@fool.com. Until next time, I'm Erin Miller. Fool on.